So today we have a special edition of Thought Rock Live titled How to Answer the Frontline's Question, ITIL, What's in It for Them? Today's guest, Lisa Lemmons, is a Thought Rock member, and a post-webcast comment that she recently made led to today's presentation. So Lisa will be talking about the real-life implementation challenges her team is facing at Presbyterian Healthcare Services. A little background on Lisa. Lisa is the configuration manager at Presbyterian Healthcare Services, and she's tasked with implementing ITIL best practices. She has over 20 years of managing mail order call centers, customer service and technical support teams, and specializes in startup companies, departments, and projects. So we're extremely delighted to have Lisa on the program with us today, especially given the fact that Lisa drove this content based on some feedback she'd given us. So joining Lisa is one of Thought Rock's co-founders and co-founder of the BeWise group of companies, John Towsley, and also our regular contributor and senior consultant of Thought Rock, Graham Furness. And the focus of today's presentation is more on the conversation and less on presentation. So we'll let it flow as the conversation flows and as the questions come in. And Lisa will be sharing her story, challenges, and successes with Graham and John. The dialogue is open and candid, and we welcome attendees to provide comments and questions at any time along the way. One question that we'll be asking the audience later, and Graham, if you just want to pull that slide up, one question that we're going to be asking the audience later is, during ITIL implementation, how have you successfully informed the end contributing departments of what it is in it for them, or what is in it for them? So just think about that question as we move through our conversation, and we'll be revisiting it later, and would love to hear your feedback, and I'm sure it might incite some more conversation based on feedback that we get. So please post questions, comments related to this question or anything else as we talk through this. So let's get started. Lisa, welcome to the presentation, and how about you just kick it off by talking a little bit about your thoughts after last year's webcast, should change and release management be the same process, and the comments that you shared with us in subsequent conversations, and then I think we'll go from there.
Thank you, Rick. During that webinar, I was faced with many challenges. I'm currently the configuration manager, but I'm still the interim change manager, and that was my original position. And here at PHS, we are working on implementing all of the ITIL best practices, and we started with change management. So it was my job to bring in the policies, write up the policies and the procedures, get training, and really sell it to our end IT users or staff, and getting them trained up and utilizing it and understanding how this is going to be best for us. I've experienced multiple webinars that, of course, address this from the business view, saying how this is going to help your company and how this helps implement processes and procedures, and that's all well and good, and that's great for the management and directors and CIOs, CEOs. But the end user is the person who gets affected, and in all honesty, it doesn't matter how much management wants this, loves this, or whips this into shape. If we don't have our end users, the person at the end of the line who's going to be doing these practices, also buying into it, also understanding why they should do this, because in many cases it does cause them to have additional work, or it can cause a process to have a little bit of more paperwork involved into it. How do we get that the end user, the end staff, the IT, your programmers, your ops departments, your software, your applications developers, how do we get them, or what do we tell them that all of this work, what's in it for them? If there's something that's in it for them, it's going to help them to buy in and do this and make this a success. If they don't believe that there is anything in there, or they don't feel or see what's in it for them, then what I'm experiencing now is basically the growth and the maturity becomes stagnant. And if you'll go to the next slide, you'll see I've kind of illustrated what I have seen over the past 2 years. This is the 2010 changes reported. So at the beginning of 2010, I became the change manager, and I started looking at our current processes and seeing what needed to be developed, and working with multiple teams, and of course taking a lot of ITIL certification classes. And by the time it came around to September, October is when I'm going to start rolling this out. And this is when the company started communicating largely to our teams that these processes are going to be coming, these ITIL processes are going to be happening, and that the management and the corporation, of course, is behind it, and this is how it's going to help us, and these are all the benefits. But, of course, those were all benefits to the company. At the end of 2010 is when I had everything prepared to go, and I started initiating the training process. This is where I started telling everyone how we could better collect our data, what this data is going to do for us, and started really selling this. And you can see between January and December that our change numbers reported per week, and we're a large company, so anybody out there who's listening is looking at these numbers going, oh my gosh, it's so small. I agree, they shouldn't be. But it's trying to get everyone to buy in that will, and more maturity that's going to help this. Well, you can see in 2010 that I'm averaging about 40 changes per week. It's about where my median is. So at the end of the year, you can see that training is coming in, and boom, you can see that big hit because people are starting to get it. They start to understand why we're doing this and what this is going to do for us. And rah, sis, boom, bah, everything's fantastic. And if you'll go to the next slide, you'll see 2011. Okay, so 2011 comes in, and except for, of course, that holiday season of the end of December and beginning of January time period, you'll see that we're kind of up there. And then if you follow the rest of the year, we basically bottom out at maintaining median of about 60. So we're averaging around 60 per week. Continued training, now we should start seeing some of the benefits. End users should start getting really relaxed into the processes. Lots of standard change models being created, enabling people to truly expedite implementing changes, speeding up their processes. This is getting a lot of procedures written for management departments to be able to incorporate in their own internal training departments. All these wonderful, great things. The maturity should be on a growth at this point. We should be around 60, but then you should be growing in 70s and 80s and 90s, which is where I expect to be. But as you can see in 2011, we basically stayed right at the implementation level, averaging about 60, which is still an increase over the 40, but the maturity has not kicked in. And when I'm working with my teams, I'm very close with them. There's over 300 IT people here. I'm very close. I speak with them all, and I'm a really good listener to what they are trying to say, and their answers are, Lisa, I can get this done. We've been doing this. I've worked here for 20 years. I've been doing this job, whatever. I know what I'm supposed to be doing, and for me to stop and have to do X, Y, or Z for some process with, a three-letter acronym or a four-letter acronym that, it has come into the company, it's slowing down my process. Or it's another comeback that says, I don't see any benefit. If I do this for you, it doesn't help me out anyway. I don't get anything from the end. So I'm reaching out. My question that I asked of you guys and became this discussion is help. What or does anyone have answers to individual departments? It can't be a blanket. It's going to have to be an individual statement to what do you tell the engineers? What do you tell the programmers? What can we tell our people who make or break the success of implementation of best practices? What's in it for them?
Lisa, there's a question actually from David, and a couple questions here actually. Just back on your slides, is this number of changes raw or the number of successful first attempt changes? That's the first question. And then the second question he has, how many incidents and problems directly resulted from the changes covered? So if you got both those down.
Great questions, and sadly too easily answered. These are raw. This is not successful. This is a mix. This is them all together. And how many resulted from incidents or problems? That is part of our maturity at this point. We started with changes, and we are not yet in the attaching of that information. We are trying to reprogram our current enterprise software. to be able to give us that information, which we haven't captured yet.
Okay, so hopefully that helps, David.
Lisa, it's John. I have a quick question. Maybe you can just clarify for everyone. Whenever we look at metrics, I think it's important to understand what it is we're measuring and why it's important. So when you look at the number of changes, you're correlating that to maturity. Can you explain for everyone just a little bit about what it is exactly you're measuring and why you think it's related to process maturity?
Because in this case, really what these numbers are is you can say these are reported changes. Many times, there's lots of cowboys out there who go ahead and do changes to systems, reboot servers, add a code change to an application because they know it's right. They've done it so many times. They don't report what's happening. Of course, they blow something up. Nobody knows what's going on with it. You've got calls into the service desk. Nobody understands why, it worked 5 minutes ago and now it doesn't work. What happened in the difference? So we were not getting, we didn't have the staff understanding that if you touch a service, if you affect any of our provided services, that it must be recorded, that it must go through the change process before you do so. So in our measuring of initially for change management, the understanding of measuring how the increase of reported changes being mature is the fact that it is the buy-in from the multiple different departments, understanding that when they are touching services, they must first report them.
Got it. And just for further sort of background and everyone's understanding, of the, I think you said 300 people, how many of those people would be able to initiate change? So when you look at saying, hey, we want to get compliance with the process and have a much higher percentage of our changes, if not 100%, recorded, and you talked about motivating individuals. How many individuals are you talking about, and how many different teams?
In all honesty, every one of those 300, there's probably about 345 actually. Everyone that is in some area, whether they're servicing servers or they're working on code, everybody has an ability of some kind to affect a service. We're a multiple hospital, clinical, medical facilities. And so we provide in this one location all of those services for those other locations.
Okay, and one last thing. I'm just trying to round out the picture for everyone a little bit. In terms of the process that you implemented, is there one change advisory board, and how often does it meet? And just not right down to the detail, but sort of quick, maybe high-level overview so everyone understands your environment. How does that work?
Actually, it's one of our success stories. We have one CAB, or one change advisory board. It meets every Wednesday morning, and one of the improvements where I have gotten buy-in, and I've gotten a lot of kudos, a lot of people who have said that the process has increased or has gotten so much better. In the past, every change, and I don't care if you were correcting the spelling on a word on a letter that went out to a patient, every change that went through our system was met at the CAB, and it usually lasted about an hour to an hour and a half. And one of the processes that we improved was that, of course, I got a lot of standard model changes implemented, and we're running somewhere around 60 to 65% of our changes implemented now are change models, expediting all the different changes or those changes that do need to get implemented. And so now our our CAB meetings usually last about 15 minutes, and we are addressing those changes that, in fact, are not low risk, but are of a more, either need a higher amount of communication or are of medium risk and have a higher implementation.
Great. So you don't think the issue is that people find the change process cumbersome? It's just that they have to follow it at all?
Exactly.
Yeah, and sorry, let me jump in a minute, Donna. A quick question as well, which I think is pertinent and rounds it out. Lisa, what are the change goals and objectives? So what kind of problem are you trying to solve?
Say that in a different way.
Well, when implementing change management, you've got your baseline metrics about these are identified issues in which why we're moving to a change process we want to try and solve. Is it changes that have failed? Is it just having changes recorded is great, but it's got to solve a problem.
Oh, sure.
So what are the change goals and objectives that you're trying to achieve and solve certain problems?
Okay, so if we stay focused only in the change arena, one of course, is our preparedness, and to make sure and to see our success rate, our fail rate, to see if we're successful with errors. Because of many different departments having same staff and same managers for, oh my gosh, in some cases 35 years, they all know it. Tribal knowledge, we try to get rid of tribal knowledge. We want to get documentation on procedures. Of course, that would be their standard models. We want to be able to see where we're failing, what teams are failing, or what areas we're failing, where we could improve. But then the bigger picture, of course, for you is we want to do exactly what David had asked earlier, which is we want to be able to tie in our incidents and our problems into our changes, and to get the rounded where changes are creating incidents, where problems are being resolved with changes, and understanding where we can improve. Our goal, of course, is 0% downtime, 0% effect on services, redundancy, and if we ever have a negative effect on on any service, we need to understand why, where it come from, and how we can make sure that that never happens again.
Okay, that's great.
Very good.
There's a couple more questions here that might again round out, and then I think obviously we want to start getting specific about some ideas maybe around the table about the objective of this call, which is to talk about how do we move forward in terms of buy-in at the front line and keep the momentum as Lisa's talking about. So Lisa, just a couple more questions, and maybe if you could try to answer them as quickly as possible. But and I'm going to give you these questions one by one, but I'll just let you know that there are 3 more right now that are outstanding. So what is, and this will tie in, I guess, into maybe some ways to communicate and move by it forward, but what is the user satisfaction with the level of incidents and the number of changes, and what feedback are you getting from users with respect to these efforts?
I'm going to have to kind of separate those. The number of changes, the number of incidents, of course, we are claiming that we have too many incidents that are happening currently. There's been a end user satisfaction or customer satisfaction level that at one point did say that they questioned the capabilities of the IT department, which of course we're trying to turn around, and we are actually. That's having a great effect. The number of changes that are being implemented, that number, of course, as you can see, our numbers are still low. The percentage rate of success that I've currently measured on my last measurement was at 97.5% success rate. So I'm very, very proud of that, because I have really instructed people that this is all about preparedness and communication, and that's helped.
Okay, great. I'll do a really easy question first, because it's probably a yes or no answer. Is this a global cab that you have?
I'm going to say yes.
Okay. And how do you ID unauthorized changes? Is it via automated reports? And if so, is there an escalation policy in place to help eradicate unauthorized changes?
I love that question. That person must work right next to me. Okay. Honestly, right now we're setting in place monitoring tools, but because of I don't know how many. We're not a big city type environment here. We're a little bit more tribal, and so as unauthorized changes are found, they're generally found by end users that something has happened. That we don't have anything that assists me in locating those except for a negative reaction if something fails.
Okay. Very good. So great questions coming in. I think everyone trying to get a feel for your environment. And then the first suggestion that we have, which I'll now bring kind of Graham and John and to kind of try to talk through, and maybe through experience, some of the things that they've seen, and then maybe brainstorm with you on some of those for people to listen in on that brainstorming on ideas for improvement for what you're looking for. Sharon actually comments that suggests tying change policy to MBOs and compensation. So there's a great catalyst to a conversation as an idea to overcome some of the barriers we're talking about. John and Graham, any comments on that or any other ideas?
Sorry, maybe I could go first, Rick. you want to go, Graham? Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just saying, yeah, you need to have, it's all part of a full sort of acceptance plan. You need the carrot and the stick. I think that's sort of part of what I would say about change acceptance and people buying in. John will jump in too, but we can go back and maybe do a little timeline from the beginning. But, there needs to be a benefit for people, and you need to know what that benefit is. So, be it project management concepts or within the ITIL and ITSM field, one of the first steps about getting buy-in is getting feedback. And so you need to know, where people's buy-in is, and they need to be telling you what motivates them. So you need to kind of source that stuff out. And then, you can tie that back in again to the carrot and the stick. Well, if your end users are having, or end staff have some type of difficulty in which change can help, this makes your life a bit easier because you can tie something directly to what they're, what hits them the most. And, you could tie it to compensation. There's a whole bunch of different packages you can do, but you really need to know your end audience and to even segregate that and to know there's differences among them. Exactly. So maybe I'd put that as a question back to Lisa, too. You mentioned before you had a great sort of rollout and you're doing a whole bunch of training. The great thing with training is that people get an idea about, here's the vision and here's all the different pieces. If it's ITIL training, it shows the larger part of the framework, and if it's more focused training, it shows maybe specifically in change management, here's what we're trying to achieve, and here's the benefits, and here's where it's a global framework if we're picking from ITIL and how it's been shown to benefit elsewhere. So that might kind of explain a little bit, Lisa, about that sort of jump in creating change tickets. So it did a great job of people thinking, hey, this is going to be great and it's going to solve a problem. But if we just go back with the basic assumption that we're saying from walking around, you're saying people are losing interest and they're not really complying and creating changes as much as they were. So something must say that they were excited, but then they discovered there's not really a lot in it for me. So I was wondering, and I'll put this back as a question for you, Lisa, now. So was there anything at the beginning you did as well as a sort of a fact-finding, problem-finding set of meetings or roundtables with the end staff?
Yes, initially as I was designing the new process, I did a lot of fact-finding of what's not working right now. Some of these things you could already guess, but you wanted to hear them from the end users. So I did what's not working now, how are you handling certain situations, how would you like to see this work, what's your biggest hang-up or your two biggest hang-ups with the current processes, and I got a lot of feedback from that and that's how I was able to better design a process in which I have a lot of people who now say that it is so greatly improved, and I almost want to contribute the fact of the growth of reported changes, not so much as to a buy-in to the new processes and to buying into a best practice, but more into the fact of, number one, that they were supplied formal training and not word of mouth and or somebody, sitting next door to them. But then the second part of it was, of course, the fact that some of their requests were actually answered and given to them. And so because of that, their comments were answered, they are going to participate.
Okay, so just to clarify, you said you sort of had two current processes before you consolidated it to one common change process, is that right?
Correct.
What were the two processes before?
Before we had two different systems. Some people would put their changes in one system and another group would put their changes in another system. Nothing was being done together. The procedures for each and the policies for each were completely different. And I guess depending upon what department you were in would be what you used, and you may or may not receive training on it because you just got hired. So one of the being able to tie it into incidents and to problems and getting us into one core enterprise application, so all records are being kept in one place, everything that can be related to each other within one place, creating a global policy, procedure, training plan in one application.
Okay, yeah, that sounds great. Because this is kind of just making me now sort of see a bit more of what's gone on. you really solved and you had the buy-in from the beginning for a phase 1, which was that people had a confusing and probably interruptive environment before with these two different processes. And again, being separate, they probably didn't provide a lot of benefit to the individual, to the end staff person, right?
Right.
So you were saying people were looking forward to getting rid of that mess and that confusion.
Yeah, and the larger one was the fact that every change, did not matter how simple or so small, every change had to wait until Wednesday morning for the CAB process. So if you discovered Wednesday afternoon that you had this simple little baby change that you wanted to get accomplished, we'd say, okay, great. We'll see you next Wednesday when we'll consider allowing you to do it.
Right.
Implementing models and getting low-risk changes out of the process really expedited and it freed up departments to be productive and get their work done.
Yeah. So in your first phase of what you did, like I like the idea that you went out and you talked to people. Sounds like you held some roundtables and team discussions.
Uh-huh.
You found out the feedback of the current situation, which is exactly what I would do as standard sort of practice. And then you heard from them that they didn't like this discoordinated and more bureaucratic, inefficient system for doing changes.
Amen.
Yeah, and so it sounds like you had buy-in and you had support from these end staff when you rolled out phase 1 of bringing out your change process.
Right.
So I think that's one of the things. If people are taking a few notes, whenever you implement change and you don't go to your end staff to find out, what do they think are the problems and the issues, you typically run up against resistance right away. But you did great, so you didn't run into that problem. So now,
Graham, David has a quick question on that. Can you just comment maybe on some specifics around the types of questions that were directed to the users to get their feedback?
Yeah, actually, I understood, or I was able to recognize and see, and I think anybody can, whenever you have the troubled employee or the department that is most resistant, the one that is most likely going to be doing the most unauthorized changes. And so I went and I selected the most outspoken people, and sometimes those are the hardest people, but you got to do it, into a room, along with leading people in multiple different departments and how they were doing their change process internally in their siloed environments. And my questions to them was, if you were going to make an improvement, where do you see the biggest wall between you and change? What is holding you back? And so I got the answers of customer satisfaction issues. When somebody asks them to do something Wednesday afternoon, they have to wait an entire week to get it accomplished. By asking them what their issues or what their problems or what their holdup or grant walls is probably the best way to say it. What the walls were that change management is preventing them from doing their job, where the frustration with change management was. That's how I got my answers.
And I think another interesting on that question, I think what David's saying now is now not IT though. He's asking, was there any process to ask end user, so the ultimate customer, the ultimate internal employee, or whether it's an external, depending on how you're supporting, but was there any effort to really be able to articulate from a non-IT perspective what the issues were and the feedback?
Okay, yeah, what I call business owners. I would have to say to David, no, I really didn't. The way our environment here works is that our business owners and our IT department, basically they're twins. The business owner has a twin in the IT department that everybody works so closely together that our IT department is able to directly represent our business owners.
Yeah, Rick, maybe I can chime in a little bit here. From my perspective, I usually get involved, with the work we do with customers at a bit higher level in terms of strategy and so on. And Lisa, I see a few things. I think the question you posed originally was, for the individual. What can I tell that individual?
Right.
And Graham rightly identified, the carrot and stick concept. So maybe I can relay a couple of stories people often learn. They're very short, but in one case where we were doing some consulting with an organization that provides IT services, so, its end customer is a paying customer, and this stuff is mission critical. They just literally have a very, very strict buy-in and policy from the executive on down, and it's you're out on your second strike. So all changes will be logged and recorded. If you make a change that is not logged and recorded, then regardless of the reason or excuse, you lose your job. Now that's a really big, tough carrot, and most organizations I recognize wouldn't do that. But in organizations where IT is the service and it's mission critical, it is quite often literally that strict. And, from an HR perspective, that's not a great way to motivate people, which I get, but that's one story. The second story, which Rick will remember, we were doing some work with some people and got this one. I don't remember the exact wording, but I remember thinking I really liked it. That the CIO had a yellow pad, and if you made an unauthorized change, then you got an appointment with the CIO made by his assistant, and you showed up at the appropriate point in time, and there were two chairs facing each other, and the CIO sat there with a yellow pad and said, I'd like you to explain to me why you made this unauthorized change, or the change that didn't go through the process. And after, great amounts of perspiration, the person in the chair would explain that, and they never went through that process more than once. Just because it does a whole bunch of things, right? It's like going to the principal's office or something, which all of us can relate to. This is just not a situation that you want to find yourself in. And the message that it sends to everyone is that from an executive level on down, we're doing this because there are lots of benefits to the business, and you've been trained and you understand and everything else. Then I'll make two more comments that I think might help or be pertinent, and other people on the session may chime in. But one is that think a little bit about, if you look at the demographic of your organization, you said some people have been here 35 years. Some of this problem will resolve itself. If I'd been in a job 35 years and somebody came along and said, here's all these wonderful benefits, I'd probably be looking at retiring in the next 2 to 3 years, or maybe 5 at the outside. And I would probably resist changing my behavior in any which way that I could. So part of that, the grand scheme of things, is I would say don't get too frustrated, because depending on how much of that turnover you have, and most of us are going to have a lot of it as the baby boomers mature, you may be able to get over that next hump as you bring the newbies in and get them properly trained, because they won't be trying to change a behavior. You'll be forming and building those behaviors. So that's sort of one thing that I think may help. And I think Graham rightly identified another thing is it's kind of time for a phase 2 where you re-energize and invigorate people. One of the things you said we see a lot, that is, the IT person is paired with a business person. The challenge you have there is much like the challenge purchasing has if a buyer is buying from the same buyer all the time. There's a personal relationship there. They're not going to follow the change process because they want to get this change done for their colleague. And they perceive that the change process is slowing it down, and they don't want to explain that to the colleague because they're getting a negative incentive from the business. So you may want to think about the relationship between those pairs of people and how that ties back to service levels. As Graham said, what are their motivations? Well, their motivation actually is to not follow the change process. Because, Betty, who I've been working with for 10 years or more, asked for this change. I know it's really simple to do. I can just change it now in the production system and it'll solve her problem for her. And then when Betty and I are out playing baseball or having beers or whatever we're doing, that strengthens my relationship with her. Those are probably the things you're dealing with. Anyways, I'll be quiet now.
That was excellent.
Yeah, John, and one of the things I was going to comment on too is as a follow-on to this session, and because some of the things you bring up in your comments, and Lisa, we've had this conversation too, is that there's an enormous component here of individuals' ability to influence behavior. You know, when you're trying to get people to change their behavior, a lot of times the focus is on, you know, standard corporate meetings and policies written and processes putting in place, but there's a lot of soft skills related to influencing personal behavior, and some of it's even related to John's comments that he just made there. And Jill Donahue, who's one of the most brilliant folks we've ever heard, talks about influencing behavior. She's listened to our recorded conversation, Lisa, that we had in preparation for this call, or for this session today. She's listened to it, and she's going to tie in her techniques that she's using in many corporations on how to show management, or anybody that's a project manager, or anybody, how to work with their peers and effectively walk them through a process of influencing behavior. What are the tested and researched tactics that you can use? And I would argue that I don't think anybody in ITIL or in IT has really thought through some of these techniques, and they are extremely powerful and really effective. So as a follow-on and part of even a solution, I would suggest that folks want to look at that session that comes out in the Thought Rock newsletter. That's Jill Donahue next week, and I think you'll thoroughly enjoy it, and it might tie into what we're talking about today. John and Graham, any comments on that in terms of that piece?
Yeah, I would say, well, and you know how I feel about it, Rick, but I think anybody who's listening in who can relate to these issues at all, you'd be crazy not to plug into Jill's session, because I'm kind of an old dog, and she's taught me some new tricks. I mean, it is behind, I think, the issues, especially with change and the implementation of change. And there are techniques that work for identifying what's in it for me. And it is, as you asked about, Lisa, your very first question, you know, how do I do that at the individual level? And absolutely, Rick, you'd be crazy not to invite all your colleagues and listen in, to be honest.
Yeah.
But we can say that unbiased because there's nothing in it for us.
Yeah, and just to add on to that too, again, you know, when we're kind of going through this story, and you know, back when I was asking Lisa some questions before, and you did a great job to find out, you know, who are these people who are resisting the change, and what are they resisting about getting another change process. And then you did a great educational job of getting people online for the overall roll into the new change. But whenever you do these types of projects, you know, really any type of process management is business reengineering. And so you're doing organizational change. And along with that, you know, a standard thing is always a communication plan. And the communication plan is not a one-time effort. So, you know, let's just say we've had that plan from the beginning and went out and talked to everyone. The initial acceptance of change was great. So we want to continue that, right? There's not just one or two or three. There's an ongoing continuous phase of communication, of continual awareness to keep people updated and onboard new people. And going back to really your issue with what you brought to us today, saying you're still finding people are kind of losing momentum, and they're saying, no, you know, I know you want changes documented, but it's holding me up, it's taking up my time, and yeah, it's a lot better now. It's not as complicated, but you know, it's now that it's not as complicated, there's still not enough time in the day, and you know, I'm going to take a few shortcuts here and there. So you know, everything connects back together. Like John said, you have. It's a balance. Everything's about a balance of management versus motivation. You have the carrot, you have the stick. So you know, you can only do what you can do in the organization with the stick, and then from the carrot point of view, you know, I would ask a question. Did you go back after the change and go back to those same groups, maybe some of the people who initially were highly opposed, and do you regularly meet up with them or have someone meet up with them and get their input again, saying, so, you know, here's what I'm noticing going on. Everyone seems to be losing momentum. You know, can you tell me the reasons? So, you know, just to clarify, maybe you've done that already, but is that something that has been going on? And if
Yes.
not you, someone else?
Yes.
So there's constant communication. You're following a communication plan to get that feedback. And so after the initial acceptance, where there, you know, was shown a lot of good high acceptance. So so what are you hearing now about why people you know, aren't as motivated?
I think it really goes real well with John's comment that I do have people here for 30, 35 years doing a position. They know it all too well, and just because we brought in a 4-letter acronym doesn't mean that they're going to change what they're doing. And so they're going to continue to do what they're doing. And honestly, when you've got somebody with that many years experience, a company does not want to lose that wealth of knowledge, that asset as well. So what, the answer is, what are you going to do, fire me?
Right.
Yeah, so they're playing a power card.
Yeah. I just want to do a quick time check here. It's 12:42, and Graham, if you just want to put up the questions and comments slide, just so we've got it up there. And also, we don't have anybody. I don't think I've gotten any specifics on the initial question. So maybe if you want to put it up there one more time. Sorry, Graham. The question that was the buy-in question back one more time.
Yeah.
And anyway, what I wanted to say is, if anybody has at this point, again, any kind of great insight, ideas into, again, some of the barriers that you've heard discussed here, there's some few other questions that are posted that are more specific around back to the types of changes and questions around the changes that Lisa's talking about, and ideally, we can maybe forward those to Lisa and she can answer those separately. I'd like to spend the next 3 to 5 minutes if there's anybody that has any ideas that wants to post a comment related to the conversation, and keep it more moving towards solutions and ideas around, again, the challenge that Lisa's bringing to the table. So John or Graham, anything, again, with just that limited amount of time that we have left, any very specific and prescriptive guidance for people that are on the line that might be in a similar situation?
Well, I would mind just suggesting that, one of the things we've come across and worked with is trying to create process champion people or groups throughout the organization. In an environment, as Lisa said, where you have people there a long time, 35 years, if within the teams they work with, you can find people who you can be identified as, a change ITIL champion or groups of people, create kind of that internal company social media type environment where you have regular meetings between the change process champions. They bring back the feedback back to the change management board to tweak their process and improve their process for better acceptance. That's quite often a really effective way of trying to build a groundswell when you have a lot of people with inertia, is to put them beside or within the same teams, try and find people that can have that momentum to kind of kickstart them into a new way of doing things. So again, having a stick helps, but that's one of the carrot ways of trying to maintain momentum and get some buy-in. And John, I'll give you a chance to sort of throw in on that too.
Yeah, I think, as I was saying, to me, the biggest thing is to understand at that individual level what the situation is, what their relationship is with their business partner or the partner in the business unit, and what might collectively motivate them to change that. And I really do believe, as Rick suggested, there'll be some good tips and techniques coming out of next week's call that will address that. And the other thing, which you may know already, Lisa, but one of the other things you learn very quickly in management or running a business is that the first thing you need to do in order to affect something is to measure it. So in this particular case, although anecdotally, you probably want to keep a list of offenders, essentially, so that rather than blanket, it's good to do things at the organizational level, but as you said up front, it's really about the individuals. So identify the individuals, and then once you've identified who they are, then just by measuring and letting them know you're measuring and getting management buy-in, so who do they report to, up to the CIO, here's the monthly report of people who didn't log changes. Maybe just start there. And at the same time, try to figure out what are the motivators that might incent them and the business partner to follow that process.
Yeah, that's a very good suggestion, John, because you're pinpointing the people, driving the lack of momentum there.
Yeah.
And
John,
sorry, go ahead, Lisa.
Hey, Rick, I actually do have one piece that I can tell for the people who are listening that are trying to get some answers, because I have identified one area where I can go and say to an end area, here's a benefit.
Great.
So I'll extend this one out there, and I'm hoping that everybody who's listening will actually share something with everyone else. for more learning. In the collection of change and the more that the changes are recorded, capturing information of will there be downtime, how much downtime, what would those time periods be, are there how many impacted or affected users are we expecting, so forth and so on. This information, we have an on-site service or help desk, depending upon what company you have, what you have. And what I do is I supply to them a daily report. Well, daily I report it to them, but it's for a week in advance, starting from today through a week forward, explaining or defining the changes that are going to take place, and then giving them priorities of whether there's going to be downtime or if it's going to be happening, has to happen during business hours. And lengths of time. This report has enabled and empowered my service desk and help desk to be able to accept a phone call from somebody who says, hey, wait, my system is now, it's down, or whatever the case may be. That help desk or service person now sounds intelligent. They are aware, empowered. They respond back to the person that's saying, yes, currently there is a change going on, and it will last from 12 until 12:30, and the system will be resumed. At that point, you can get logged back in. The person gets off the phone that called in is satisfied. They have answers. They have expectations that are real, and the service employee, of course, feels good about their job. On the end of where this really benefits the user is the person or the team that submitted that change. If, in fact, there was a real problem and this was happening at 2 o'clock in the morning, that same service desk person, had they not known, would then be picking up and paging that person and waking them up in the middle of the night to tell them that they must immediately respond to this issue and get it resolved. Had they not entered that change, they would not have been able to sleep. Well, they could have slept through the night if they had entered the change, and if they didn't enter the change, well, then guess what? They're getting woken up. So they have a benefit of entering their change by the simple fact that they have communicated this well enough that everyone's aware, and we know that there's really not a problem.
Very good. John, any comments there? Again, I always, just to defer to you at this point in time, put your executive hat on that you've had to do even with inside the BeWise group, and when you look at some of the motivations that might have worked or techniques that were used. Anything you can think of in terms of bringing that to the folks?
Yeah, I think maybe nothing new in terms of what Lisa just said, except that's a great example of a direct benefit that people see. And I think, as I said, at the broadest level, understand behavioral change and all the various components. So you need all of the things we talked about working together. You need executive buy-in. You need a CIO with a yellow pad, maybe. You need the managers to know who on their teams are not following process. And you need to understand what their motivators are. So what's the negative motivator that's causing them to behave this way? And on a case-by-case basis, try and eliminate that. That means that you need to know who the people are who aren't following the process, and you need those details.
Okay, you know what, and I think it's great conversation, and I think a lot of folks, everyone's for the most part stayed right all the way through, so we haven't had any drop-offs, which means that people are engaged, and I think sometimes people need to absorb it a little bit more, or quite honestly, the people that are on this call are here because they didn't have any answers and they were looking for some. So I think you never know in terms of what the audience is going to be looking for, and I think that's the case here. I think, and the good thing is we had the three of you on. We can bring some of that to it, and I think a follow-on with Jill. Graham, can you just put up Jill's slide, just so we've got that up there? So next week, again, as a follow-on to this session, which again I think will help, is Jill Donahue. So there's the information on getting buy-in and ensuring project success. She's going to talk very specifically about it as it relates to some of the challenges that you're facing here with gaining that buy-in and momentum right on the front lines. And a great session to attend. So Lisa, I want to just wrap up and let everyone know as well that if there's any other additional comments or questions to go out to Lisa, you can filter them through our ThoughtRock email. And Graham, if you want to bring up that last slide, should have our contact information on there, and we will make sure that Lisa gets those questions and gets them directly, and that she can interface with you directly. If Lisa, if that's okay, if folks that were on the line have additional questions.
That's fine.
Okay, great. And we'll make sure that happens. And I want to thank, again, this is the first time we've done this more conversational related, kind of a round table though, but a controlled round table of 4 really. And I think it works really well, and I think people do like to be the bird on the wall, Lisa, in terms of your suggestion of having this kind of conversation. People were really a bird on the wall listening to the conversation, and it's a good learning tool for them. So hopefully other folks on the line will come up with other similar topics where maybe they can chime in, and people like Lisa who have contributed as a Thought Rock member can also be the bird on the wall and listen to some of those ideas of overcoming barriers in certain areas. So Lisa, thank you very much for the work, for your effort in terms of bringing this forward. And obviously, like I said, with respect to the attendance and how long people stayed on, it was an important topic for many people in the Thought Rock community. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
John and Graham, thank you very much as well. And again, I just wanted to highlight again that we'll be back online and live at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time next Tuesday with Jill Donahue. So hopefully you will attend. And again, we'll keep you posted on how we're going to keep this series going. That's started from Lisa's initiating of this concept of buy-in, and we're going to take this through in the next 3 or 4 series with Thought Rock. So stay tuned for those follow-up topics in addition to Jill's topic. John and Graham, thank you very much as well. Graham, if we'll just leave this, we'll leave this slide up here for a few more minutes if people want to make sure they've got the email address down. As was mentioned very early on, though, the slides and the session taped with all the audio will be available in the Thought Rock on the Thought Rock site for all Thought Rock members following this presentation. So thanks again, everyone. Thank you, Lisa. And I've got a bunch of folks that have kind of chimed in to say thank you, thank you, thank you. And Dorothy's also made a comment that there's it's a benefit in that we can plan work better around planned outages. So there's other comments that are still coming in. So we'll actually maybe capture these, Wanda, if we can, and get them over to Lisa as well. So with that, we'll shut down here and thank everyone again for putting this together, and we'll talk soon.
Great. Thanks everyone.
Thanks. Bye.